Coming up next, an interview with an iconic singer-songwriter who climbed up from the underground and had one of the biggest hits of 1987. This hit song, it was one of the most unlikely hits of the decade because of its subject matter. See if you can guess what it is. When this singer played it for live audiences before she was even going to put it on the album, they never really liked it because it was sad and it made them uncomfortable. So when her manager told her it should be the lead-off single from her album, she was shocked. She argued that it would never be a hit, but he talked her into it. He was right. ASCAP awarded it the most performed song of the year, and it went to the top of the charts. The thing is, the song was written about another person, but many would find out decades later that the secret in the song was actually about the artist herself. Find out the song and the story coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember trying to figure out how to do the moonwalk back in the 80s, after you saw Motown's 25th, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now, click the big red button and click the bell so you always know when our latest interviews and videos drop. I struggled to figure out the moonwalk for many months. Also check us out on Patreon for even more content. So it's time for our latest edition of Revelations, where featured artists go deep on their greatest songs and albums. Stories that you truly won't find anywhere else. Today we have a special session with a singer-songwriter who rose from the New York underground to become one of the most successful and respected female artists of the late 80s and 90s. One of my favorite singer-songwriters of that time, Suzanne Vega. She had a great song in the John Hughes film Pretty in Pink in 1986, Left of Center. You can find me left of center, wondering about you. And released a very thought-provoking song about child abuse in 1987 called Luka, about a little boy who lived in her apartment complex. My name is Luka. I live on the... Many call the song My Name is Luka, but it's not actually called that, it's actually just Luka. As Vega was preparing to release her important sophomore album, Solitude Standing. She would occasionally play Luka for live audiences, but they never liked it. They never took to it. Once they figured out the song was about child abuse, she said it made him sad and uncomfortable. So when her manager told her he thought that Luka would be a hit, she was really shocked. In a past interview, she said, and I quote, "We had a big argument, and he said, I think it's an important song. It's a song about abuse. This is the 80s, and no one's writing songs about issues anymore. Music changed the world at one time." And I fought him. I said, "I don't think that music changed the world." And he really let go. We ended the Vietnam War, you know? How can you tell me that music didn't change anything? So in the end, I said, fine, knock yourself out. Well, her manager was absolutely right. Luka became a number 3 hit in 1987, and ASCAP awarded the most performed song of the year, and it was actually nominated for several Grammy Awards, including Record of the Year and Song of the Year, back when the Grammys actually meant something. It was very competitive. Even though Luka was told from the perspective of a little boy, Suzanne Vega was hiding a secret from her past in the song that would come out decades later. It'd be a while before that happened. Find out what it is and the story of the real Luka in our exclusive interview coming up next. Here's Suzanne Vega. I mean, I remember the first time that I heard this song, and then I remember distinctly the first time I saw the music video for Luka. My name is Luka. You spent most of your childhood living near 102nd Street in Upper Manhattan, and you were living on 23rd Street when you wrote Luka, as I understand it. You wrote it years before, is that right? It came out?
I wrote it 3 years before. Yeah, I wrote it in 1984. It came out in 87. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've read some of your songwriters interviews in different songwriting magazines about this, and I love your approach to songwriting, how you describe it. Take us back to that moment in the afternoon where you were listening to Lou Reed's Berlin album and how Luka kind of came to you.
Well, I had been thinking about that song for months. As I've often said, there was a child who lived upstairs from me. His name was Luka. And I used to get his mail from time to time. And one day, can't remember why, I lived on the ground floor. I live upstairs from you. Technically, everybody lived upstairs from me, but and I saw this child there at the elevator, and I said, "What's your name?" And he said, "My name is Luka." And I said, "Oh, you're Luka. Yeah, I get your mail." And he was just an interesting kid. It kind of tough and streetwise, but also very sensitive face. And um, I had been thinking of writing a song from the point of view of a child who was abused. Um, so I thought, oh, Luka, and then I realized that it was a universal name. Because when I used to get his mail, I looked at it and I remember thinking, I don't know what kind of name this is. I don't know if is it Italian? Is it Puerto Rican? I didn't even know if the Luka whether it was male or female. So there's something about that idea that appealed to me, that it was this universal name. And I was attracted to it because of that. And then the rest of it just kind of came flying out after months of thinking about it. Once I wrote the first verse, the whole thing came out in 2 hours.
I love how you talk about your approach to songwriting, that it's something that wiggles around in your brain and you're trying to find the right angle. And then once you do find that angle, it's like it comes out. And I think any creative person understands that you're trying to figure out what is this song about? What is it trying to say? And how do I get listeners involved, which is what you said. Tell me about that process. I'm really very interested in that.
Yeah, I wish it were always easy. It isn't.
Yeah.
There are times where the best ones have a kind of character or a storyline, an image of some kind. And then once you find the language and the whole thing starts to flow, and especially if it starts to rhyme, then you know you're really onto something. The best ones seem to write themselves. The most difficult ones are the ones that take months, where you have to keep poking at it and say, well, I have this beautiful melody, but what is the song about? So, you know, it's important to keep the images clear and sharp in your mind so that you can show them to the audience. If you're just writing about a vague general feeling, it's just not going to come out as good as if you actually have something defined and clear. And usually for me, kind of visual that you are wanting to share.
Well, especially with Luka, where really the first line it's a first person narrative where he's introducing himself. And I love how you did that. That was very unique, especially in the time, radio in 1987 and the things that were going on.
My name is Luka. I live on the second floor.
Yeah, I thought of it in a way. Yes, he's introducing himself to the listener, and I felt that was important. So that was a moment. I think I had to figure that out when I wrote the song. I had to figure out that we had to present the child's perspective to an unsuspecting neighbor, you know, an unsuspecting listener, which would be the person listening to the song. So it was tricky to reveal certain things and then hide other things. And I had to kind of walk that line, and then it had to rhyme and it had to have good melody. It was a very tricky bit of work there.
It makes sense that Lou Reed is such an influence because was such a great storyteller.
Yeah.
In that narrative, how you were listening to his music.
Well, the thing that impressed me when I first saw him was he wrote a song called Caroline Says Part 2.
Caroline Says.
And I was interested in that song partly because of the subject matter. It's a woman who's being abused, and there's also some drug use or something like that in the song. But I was impressed that he very unselfconsciously took the point of view of the woman and was expressing that in his songs. He did it very naturally. And the other thing is that he played acoustic guitar all through the Berlin album. It's basically, Lou Reed, this big rock and roll guy, is playing acoustic guitar. And this really made me feel that I could do that. I could write that way. And it made me feel confident about assuming the male perspective.
Just don't ask me what it was.
It's very confessional, Luka, but it doesn't give it away. That's what I love about it, is you're stating the problem without really saying what the problem is, and you're you're kind of honoring the listener instead of just throwing it out there. This is exactly what this is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, because in real life, people don't throw it out there. You know, it's very rare that someone will actually, you know, usually you're trying to hide it because it's a family issue and you love your parents, or, you know, there's whatever are the reasons, but very often it's hidden. And that's part of the problem. So that's why I had to hide it in the song as well.
You just don't argue anymore. Just don't argue.
When I was growing up and I heard it and talked to a friend who also had heard it about the same time, we were wondering if Luke is a real person, and that was what was so interesting about the song, is trying to figure out. And you know, you observed Luka and being around friends. I remember you stating that he's very different from the other kids.
He seemed different in that he was kind of very sensitive, self-aware child. I do not think that the real Luka was abused. I think he was, you know, I never heard that coming from his. So I wasn't writing about his actual perspective. I mean, more recently, I've revealed, because some people have figured out that it was actually my own experiences and my brothers and sisters. So I was assuming Luka's identity. I was trying to find a persona as far away from my 24-year-old female self as I could find. And I thought a 9-year-old boy would be the perfect disguise. And so that's what really happened there.
I think that's what resonated with so many people. I coming from a history of abuse myself, and other people who dealt with it and hide it because they want to protect the victim, and that's why so many lyrics in it resonate. It's not just about child abuse, of course, but I mean, one of the things that makes Luka such a haunting tune is that it reaches people that are well into adulthood and during some kind of emotional or physical abuse that's in their past or current. I mean, there's so much of that going on. You know, I mean, I've been married for years before I found out that my wife and her previous marriage had been a victim of a lot of mental abuse and things like that. So I think we're all, you know, many people are part of that. There are many heart-wrenching, evocative lines in the song, but the one that always just puts a lump in my throat is, "They only hit until you cry. After that, you don't ask why."
After that, you don't ask why.
Man, just so powerful, and you just become numb to the pain. And you really brought that out. That was such an incredible reflection in the lyrics.
Thank you. Thank you for understanding that line, because some people don't, you know, I've been asked a lot, like, what do you mean by that? But at some point you give up, your spirit breaks, and then you don't fight back. You just, you sort of go away, you know, at its worst. So thank you.
Just don't argue anymore. Just don't argue.
Like I said, I remember the very first time I heard the song, and then like the next day I saw the video on MTV. It was a very rich time, 1986 to 1988, for confessional and poignant writing from female icons. I mean, you think about like even somebody like Madonna, "Papa Don't Preach,"
Papa, don't preach.
"Live to Tell."
Hope I live to tell the secret.
Incredible songwriting there. And of course, Natalie Merchant, 10,000 Maniacs, "What's the Matter Here?"
What's the matter here?
Fast Car, Tracy Chapman. I mean, I could go on and on and on.
You got a fast car. I got a
It was really refreshing to hear something on the radio that wasn't just about, you know, sex and drugs and cars.
Or true love, you know, which I mean, people write about being in love.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, my manager was really the one who saw the potential in the song. And I had thought of it as kind of a private song that people might not really understand. But he said, this is a song about an issue. And he also said, this is the 80s and people are writing about nonsense. So I think he said something like that. But his feeling was that it's important to write about issues and that they do affect society. And even if it won't necessarily stop the problem completely, but it's part of the dialogue of culture, you know. So that's the way he saw it, and in the end, his vision was correct.
Yeah, I read that you kind of fought him on it just because, like you said, you thought that it was a little too personal. And I mean, let's be honest, it's a very it's like Losing My Religion, REM. It's one of those songs, a very surprising number one, or I mean, it was number one. It was very close, but a very surprising hit. And the same thing with Losing My Religion and like The Way It Is, Bruce Hornsby. Those were songs that you wouldn't have a tastemaker point out and say that's a guaranteed number one hit, you know, or that's going to be a huge hit.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
What I love most about Luka is how you wrote in the language of a child, and you did that so well. I think that's what made it so accessible.
It's 'cause I'm clumsy. I try not to talk too loud.
And the music video was important, directed by the same people that did Take On Me, Aha, right?
Yeah, yeah. They were excited by the song, and they sent a treatment, and I thought this was really, I was very happy with what they did. Yeah, it all worked. I mean, I basically did what they told me to do. They told me to find things in my own closet of clothing that had movement, that would move in the wind, and any hats or scarves or anything that I would wear. So I wore my own wardrobe for the most part, and basically did what they told me to do. There was a lot of running around. Run from here to there, okay. And they were great to work with. It was terrific.
Just don't ask me what it was. Just don't.
Yeah, the experimental animation, the technique that they'd used on several of those videos, and it still stands up. It's incredible, you know, almost 40 years later, and it's still amazing. You know, Solitude Standing was such an outstanding sophomore album. It was a big success, particularly in the UK, where you're very popular. Went to number 2. It was number 1 in New Zealand and in most of Scandinavia. Why do you think your music resonated so deeply with fans in Sweden and Norway, for example? You know, I mean, it sold over 5 million copies around the world.
One thing that I thought was striking about Sweden and Norway is the fact that Leonard Cohen could go to number 1 there. It's like the one place in the world where Leonard Cohen was like a guaranteed number 1 selling album every time he made an album. So I've always been very flattered by that attention. You know, and I don't know if it's a melancholic streak in the Swedes and the Norwegians, but you know, it could be.
Well, John Gordon's guitar solo, was that part of the original arrangement, or is that kind of something that came about in the studio? I was always curious about that.
Well, John and I played together for quite a few years. I think I know he played on the first album, and he played on my demos also. And then around the time that we made the second album, he had found he found other work, but we wanted him to do the solo that he had done live. So it was something that developed over time. When I first he was still playing with me and playing as part of the group that I was playing with. And so we asked him to come back and do that on the album. And I'm still in touch with John. He's really great. We have lunch from time to time, and he's still a part of my life. Yeah.
Well, as the lead single, I mean, it went to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100, number 2 in Sweden, and top 10 in many other countries. And then he dominated the Grammy Award nominations in 1988, Record of the Year and Song of the Year and Best Female Pop Vocal Performance. I mean, that had to be a really cool thing to see that.
I was amazed. I really was. I didn't know. I had always thought of the Grammys as kind of this mainstream thing, and I'd never thought of myself as mainstream. So the fact that they could honor me that way with these nominations, I was excited. I was surprised. I was very humbled that they asked me to play on the show with just me and the guitar. I thought that was huge because normally, I mean, it's always been about this big production. So the fact that they had asked me to just simply stand and sing the song was very nerve-wracking, but I was very proud.
My name is Luka.
I love how also it's been used in pop culture. I don't know if you saw how The Simpsons used it in Scrubs. Yeah.
My name is Luka. I live on the second floor.
Well, over 9 studio albums, you've composed so many stirring songs. It's really, I think it's really cool that Luka. It's got to be gratifying that that's one of the cornerstone songs of your career to be a song that means so much to people and that spoke to a real issue that I think has opened up dialogue and conversation with so many people.
Yeah, I felt that way too. I felt that it's a special song with a special message, and I feel that I was sort of picked out to give that message, and that's why that song became so popular. It's because people needed to hear it at that moment in time. I that feeling has stuck with me throughout my life. You know, I can write other songs. I can write songs I think might be a hit, but the fact is that Luka has and had a special message, which is still resonant.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Make sure to leave us a comment about Suzanne Vega and Luka. She has so many other great songs. We talked about Tom's Diner, and we talked about Left to Center. Again, just such a great singer-songwriter. Let us know your memories of the song. What did you think about it? Let's have a great celebration of this great singer-songwriter that really came from the underground and became one of the #1 alternative artists in the early 90s. Don't forget about 99.9 Fahrenheit degrees. Great album as well. So if you like our content, we invite you to subscribe below. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friend.